Ushangwa, good morning everyone, and welcome. I'm Marie Kleist. I am the head of Cultural and Social History Department. I am delighted to welcome all of you to our seminar today titled Indigenous Women's Issues in Canada and Greenland. A very important subject. Indigenous women in Canada and Greenland face a multitude of interconnected challenges, and that stems from colonial, historical, social, economic, and political factors, amongst others. And this seminar provides an overview of some of these pressing issues impacting Indigenous women in these two Arctic regions. With this in mind, I would like to extend a warm welcome to our esteemed guests from Canada. We are incredibly grateful to Susie Basil, who graciously proposed the idea of collaborating for this seminar during her stay in Nuuk, along with her colleagues. We genuinely appreciate your proposal and contribution. Furthermore, we extend a warm welcome to our local presenters as well, from Illismaatsarfik and the Human Rights Council of Greenland. All your dedication to this cause is commendable, and we look forward to your insights. Last but not least, we are delighted to have our distinguished students and colleagues here with us today. And to keep us on track and ensure the smooth flow of this seminar, my colleague Riviok will make sure to serve as a facilitator and a timekeeper, and will introduce a brief introduction of today's presenters. And so let's embark on this journey of knowledge and understanding as we explore the critical issues facing Indigenous women in Canada and Greenland. I'll move or now pass the floor to Susie, and then afterwards to Rivio.
Koinak. Thank you very much, Marie. Koe, good morning, everyone. Thank you also to you, Rivio. I'm very happy to see this academic activity finally come to fruition. This reminds me of my academic session that I came to do here at the university in 1996. This is a very long time ago. I have a very good memories of it, and this is why I wanted to repeat the experience, but this time as a professor, and also in collaboration, of course, with your professors here at Illismaatsarfik. In 2020, my university, Université du Québec en Abitibi-Témiscamingue in Quebec, Canada, and your university, Illismaatsarfik, signed a collaboration agreement, and today's activity is part of this desire to establish a collaboration with common field of interest with respect to teaching, research, and students' mobility. It is also clearly stipulated that when possible, seminars and conferences will be organized in collaboration between the two institutions. I would like to thank our respective rector for the trust they have placed in this agreement, so Gita Alderheim and Vincent Rousson. That said, I would like to thank Professor Marie Kleist for her help and collaboration in organizing this seminar. We have identified a common topic, Indigenous women's issues in Canada and Greenland, and we hope that you will learn a little bit more about the issue facing by Indigenous people in our respective regions. I would like finally to thank the Dialogue Network for its financial assistance to make it possible for all of us to come from Canada and share with you today. So, Koina, thank you.
Yeah, a round of applause for both her and for Marie. As we have already established, my name is Riviok Løstrøm, and I'll be your moderator for today. That means that I will ensure that you do get the breaks that you all deserve to get coffee. And that's another service announcement. Our elevator has broken down this morning. So they have to bring the coffee, tea, and other refreshments one at a time out here. So that's why we don't have a tray of coffee here as we usually do for these events, but you can go out here and get your coffee and tea during the breaks, no worries. I am lecturing here at the university in my alma mater. So I'm very, very proud to be here in the Department for Cultural and Social History as well. I am also the chair of the Human Rights Council of Greenland. So our secretariat, represented up here by Ned Duke, will be holding a presentation later on as well as the ending presentation. This seminar will be held in English, and it is not translated, unfortunately, and that is because we had originally planned it as something more internal here, and then we got so many requests for live streaming it. So that's why there had been no time for getting any kind of translations, and I apologize for that. The session will, as I just mentioned, be live streamed on our Facebook page, Elisabeth Sarfik's Facebook, and I just want you to be aware of that. But it is here that the camera is pointing, so your rights are being upheld. And I will move on to Dr. Magali Quentel-Marinu, and I hope I pronounce everything correctly. She is a doctor in human geography from McGill University, and she also pursued a postdoctoral internship focusing on the role of Inuit women and their contribution to the development of the community within the environment, society, and policy group of the University of Ottawa. And since 2018, Ms. Quentel-Marinu has held a position as professor researcher at the Urbanization Culture Society Center of the National Institute of Scientific Research. She collaborates with the organization Paktutit, and which is Inuit Women of Canada. And she focuses on the socioeconomic issues that particularly Inuit women are affected by in Inuit Nunangat. So without further ado, I welcome you here to the stage, and I will move it to your presentation as well in the meantime. Damessa.
Yes. Olaku. Good morning, everyone. Thank you first for the presentation, and thank you also for the organization of this seminar. I'm really pleased to be joining you this morning. And also, before I start, I wanted to thank all the participants from the projects that I'll be presenting today. The presentation today explores the economics of care as embodied in Inuit women's work and everyday practice, expanding feminist understanding of connections between money, profit, and care and concerns for others. I will try not to speak too fast. So the presentation will go over theories behind economics of care from a feminist and Indigenous perspective. Then I'll present the context of Nunavut and present the data and explore the labors of care through women's practice, and then discuss those implications. So decades ago, feminist scholars have demonstrated that economic theories have failed to consider women's contribution and the importance of unpaid labor. In foregrounding radical change to economic theory in dialogue with an ethic of care, feminist scholars interrogate the connection between the realm of money, profit, and care and concerns for others. As such, economics of care is concerned with about alternative ways of thinking about economics, and it rests on two principles. First, that care is embedded in a given society, in the norms of a given society, and therefore it is highly contextual and not universal. So meaning that there's a variety of ways to care for others, and that our economic decisions are not based on one universal and rational approach. The second point is that care involves emotional and relational work that supports social reproduction through the maintenance of a social web of relation in which we find ourselves. Indigenous scholars, as well as feminist political ecology scholars, have expanded the care theory by foregrounding other kinds of relationships. For example, beyond human and with lands and water relationships. So that an indigenous ethic of care is not limited to human relationships, as feminist scholars have proposed. Rather, it is rooted in place-based epistemology that involves a large spectrum of relations between animal, human, living, non-living, including land and waters. But also an indigenous ethics of care, land is a site of connection across time, across memories and stories. So accordingly, the economics of care from an indigenous perspective is concerned of the labors that sustain all those relationships and the relational labors of reproducing community modes of life. So turning now to the context of the research, so the Inuit Nunangat is the traditional homeland of Inuit in Canada. It comprises of 4 regions that have distinct legal and political status, but I won't go into detail here. But more importantly, Nunavut is maybe the largest territory, having achieved like a more fuller self-determination process, and about 85% of its population identify as Inuit. Across that whole region, for centuries, Inuit women's labor has included a variety of activities on the land, provisioning food, resources, and care. Numerous studies have shown the complementarity of women and men's role, both within the home and on the land. None of these spaces being specifically gendered. In the aftermath of World War II, the colonial agenda of the Canadian state has led to a series of social policy aiming to transform northern economic and social landscape to more southern standard. Across the Inuit Nunangat, interventions included control over game management, forced relocation of Inuit population into settlement, and cultural disruption through residential schooling, among many. Women's role within the home was paramount in colonial northern social policy. Many educational materials were developed to promote appropriate gender behavior, such as the Book of Wisdom for Eskimo and Living in the New House. Both these books present typical Euro-Canadian gender family role, the male breadwinner and the female homemaker. Such policy targeting Inuit girls and women to be trained in domestic science and household economics to become housewife, while men were expected to engage in the labor market to fulfill their breadwinner role. There's a few examples here of what women and girls' work should involve, how to dress a table, for instance. These books assumed a lack of caring ability for both women and men. As pictured here, I don't know if you can see, but in the table of content, almost every section intends to teach Inuit how to care for new babies, how to care for rifles, how to care for money, and proper use of family allowance. This material was produced within a paternalist framework that assumed objective and scientific truth, Yet it reveals its own sets of cultural constructed gender bias. Federal agent, police, and missionaries, all male, brought to the North conceptions of gender roles that pictured Inuit women into a home and away from the land, as it was conceived as a male domain. So the Book of Wisdom, for instance, illustrates the relation between the cultural knowledge and colonial power as displayed by the Canadian state. Here, the illustration of women on the top carrying responsibility and their friend, the police officer. Okay, so it resulted in the erasure and the silencing of women's contribution, relationship to land, and their role in household economies, both in the scientific and bureaucratic narratives. The disruption of Inuit livelihoods involving land, sea, human and non-human relationships leaves us with many questions about the continuity and discontinuities of women's labor from an Inuit perspective of care. So using data collected between 2012 and 2022 from two distinct projects in Nunavut, mainly in Kanjik-Tuguapik and Iqaluit, I will now present how women's economic contribution embodies an Indigenous economics of care that centers a broad understanding of caring relationships. So data were collected through economic diaries to document the flow of money between and across household, individuals interviewed to capture work experience, caring labor, and everyday practice, two elders sharing circle exploring social and economic transformation in the communities, and one online forum to present preliminary results to policymakers. So today in Nunavut, both land-based activities and wage labor contribute important economic resource to families. In Kanjik-Tuguapik and Iqaluit, women engage actively in domestic labor, being the primary caregiver for their household and extended families. All women participants engaged in land-related work in various degrees. Activities range from occasional berry picking and fishing to regular extended travel on the land and country food preparation. Starting in the 1990s, Inuit women have rapidly engaged in the developing labor force. Compared to men, they were taking on jobs in the field of education, health, and administration in their community. On the table here, on the top, the line shows women's employment rates, and you can see starting, well, the difference is not very big between the two, but since 2011, women's employment rates have been higher than men. And the unemployment rates on the bottom shows that the gap is widening. So, of course, the 2021 data shows a big drop for the both of them, but that's the data that were collected during the pandemic, so we might be seeing a little adjustment after. In terms of earnings now, Inuit women's, Nunavut exhibits one of Canada's lowest gender gap. So Inuit women are earning as much or more than men since 2011. And despite the decline in employment due to COVID in 2020, women continue to earn much more than men. So Northern narratives have presented this situation as an issue about modernity versus tradition, where women are seen as embracing modernity faster than men and turning their back to traditional land-based livelihoods. However, a closer look to the connections between the world of money and the world of care can reveal a contrasting interpretation, one that we can argue speaks to Indigenous economics of care. As Laura says, life is about working hard for your family. Life is about connecting with our land and animals. Life is about knowing the Halunat way, but never forgetting the Inuit way. Teaching life is what women do. An Inuk woman is always caring for her family. That's my main role. Many Inuit women are also employed because that's the way to bring money to go hunting. And we also participate in the land work. I go hunting and fishing, and I prepare country food. It's a circle. All the work I do is connected, and this way my family is healthy. In exploring the flow of women's income and everyday economic practice, we found that women devote a large amount of money to care for others in their household, but also across kin-related families. Buying food and groceries for others, paying bills for parents, sisters, siblings, and children, hosting meals and family events. These are all ways of redistributing and sharing what the money they earn through employment. But everyday economic practice also included money flowing towards care to land-based relationships. So their income supports access to land for numerous members of their family, buying hunting equipment or taking on loans to purchase large equipment. In Inuit women's discourse, wage employment is a way to maintain their caring role for others, but also to bring their family hunting, camping, fishing, berry picking, seaweeds harvesting, all these being a responsibility to nurture relationship to land and waters. Despite tremendous obstacles to the maintenance of land-based relationship, whether it is the high cost of hunting equipment that prohibits many Inuit to access their land, or extractive industries that disrupt the landscapes, women are central economic agent in the social reproduction of caring for the land. So, women's contribution challenge three aspects of the classic economic perspective in the North, and therefore supporting the relevance of an Inuit economics of care. So first, women are important economic contribution to land-based economic challenge the static portrait of Inuit women being peripheral to the hunting economy, so only in support of their male counterpart. And this is important because contemporary social policy in the North, both within government but also Indigenous organizations, have yet to fully examine the gender role disruption. And these data also highlight the breadth and depth of women's role in the social, cultural, economic, and environmental relationship that characterize life in the Arctic. Second, women's contribution expands the homemaking as not being limited to the house, but inclusive of the land. So Northern colonial social policy has emphasized Inuit women's homemaking as a matter of dwelling house, rendering invisible women's relationship to the land. However, throughout this project, women's stories and voice clearly show that land is home, and women are nurturing that relationship through everyday practice. And finally, this research genders the experience of Northern mixed economy. Women are shown to be active economic agents, allowing for the reproduction of Inuit livelihood. By considering wage employment as part of the labor of caring for kin, community, and the land, we can argue that women's everyday practice might resist rather than reproduce capitalist colonial approach to economics. So therefore, an Inuit economics of care can illuminate new ways of thinking about the connection between money and care, and are inclusive of all relationships that are relevant to Indigenous society. Nakomi. Thank you.
Thank
Thank you so much. And we're pretty good on time. Yes. I'm very proud of us so far. I will exchange mics with you because that one is easier to give to people who want to ask questions.
Perfect,
Yeah.
thank you.
Yeah. So are there any comments or questions to the wonderful presentations we just had? Or would you like me to start the ball, so to speak? Because there is quite a lot that we as Inuit in Greenland can recognize in what is being portrayed here, I feel. And I think many of us had a shift when we thought about it, that yes, we are not just reproducing the economics of the Nordics, we're actually using it to be able to do what we have always done. So that was a nice shift in my mind, because I think for many of us that there is a feeling of a little bit of shame of being so white, I guess in that context, because not many of us go hunting, not many of us leave the city, because not many of us have the equipment or the boat or anything like that. So this was a nice way of kind of putting a nuance to the way that I view myself, for example. So that's my first ball, so to speak. Are there any questions from the audience or any comments? Yes, I'll come to you. And please, when you could you state your name before you say anything, just so that if you are comfortable with that. Here you go.
Hi, my name is Sarah, and I'm at the teacher training education. I see a lot of similarities between women in Canada and over here, because we see the same pattern among our trainees, students. The number of men is lower than women, and sometimes we have a whole class with no men. And in the communities, we also see the women getting educated and yet contributing with doing the same work with land-based or preparing the food. So it's very similar.
Thank you. Thank you for your comments. I think I'm eager to learn more about the context in Greenland for sure. I think maybe one thing I could add to this is it working? Yeah, okay. I think the issue in terms of economics is how do we value, how each contribution is valued. Like, is land-based work valued enough across different communities, therefore valuing men's contribution? Or are we just valuing like the labor employment? Like, I think that's one of the questions that is going on, at least in Nunavut or in Inuit and Wangat in Canada. So.
Up.
Thank you so much, Magali, for your presentation. That was very interesting. It struck me when you said that, it's a question, when women seems to earn much more than men. And I thought, does it refer to, does it mean that women have a higher salary than males? Do you know if that's the instance, or?
No, it's mainly because they engage in a larger proportion in the labor market. Like the rates of employment and the participation and employment rates are much higher for female. And it's also because of the types of employment that they engage in. So mostly women engage in public service, which have like higher salary and benefits associated with it. And it's full-time, usually full-time employment compared to men who have more like occasional or seasonal or part-time jobs. So that's mainly where we see the difference.
Thank you.
Oasida me ataqarpunga social rådgiver ilinniartuunga unnaana oqaatingeriarakku ilumo qanunalaqartitsingivarput piniartuuneq nunami pissarsiortuuneq unga atassuserusunnarpo sulingaangatta soorlu feriartarfingut industrimutungapput aasami feriartarpungut fabrikkimisulisartu tassani imalun allaffimmiu tassani feriartarmata ukiakku feriartarpungut naasorissaasu tassani katersisarmata na imma uangut tassani ungasillisaaqataanerluni piniartuuneq annikillisu immaannunatsinni soorlu eqalliartoqartarpo ammassisarput aavartarput feriat atuarfimmingaarni sulifeqarfinnut tassunga atassuserneqarnikuunginnamik.
Atipuyortoriana. Yeah, her name is Sila, and I will quickly translate what she said. She wanted to comment on the fact that the seasonal work that we do now and the way that we do all our vacation and holiday time is based on Western standards for their version of harvesting and so forth, and it has no real connection to our times of harvest here in Greenland, and that it affects the hunters and fishermen here because they do not correspond those times, and that made her question how much we actually value our fishers and our hunters here in Greenland.
Thank you for the question and the comment. I mean, I completely agree. This is something that we've heard through the project because we also did a lot of interviews with men. And the main reason for not taking on jobs that are full-time with a very fixed schedule was like no flexibility to go hunting or on the land. So I think the way, I think there's a reflection to have like in Inuit Nunangat and maybe here too about how do we organize employment, how employment is being organized so to suit people's needs. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you for the interesting presentation. My question is, could you please repeat what was the source for the definition of homemaking? Because I think it would be useful for my own research.
The definition of homemaking?
Yes, and the source.
And the source?
Yes, that you said didn't have did not correspond to what you found.
Oh.
Their definition.
Yeah. Okay. So you mean in the literature
yes,
or
yes,
in the policy discourse?
In both, if it could be
yeah.
possible.
So, well, there's a few research documenting homemaking as being related to dwellings, like in house. And there's that literature on Indigenous care, ethics of care, that expands that definition to include other relationships that are beyond just the dwelling and the house, but inclusive of all other types of relationship. And I can give you a few after if you want.
Thank you very much.
My name is Barma. I teach at the Teach Education. We have many female students who become teachers in settlements. And thinking about the economics where men earn less, I think the women provide with their salary, and the men, the subsistent hunters, provide with meat, and that's how the society is. So we don't appreciate the hunters, fishers, because we don't have numbers. Just a thought.
Mm-hmm. Completely. Thank you for the comment, and I completely agree. It really resonates with what we've heard during the research. Yeah.
Yeah, det är riktigt. We have a municipality called Qaqata that actually changed the times for vacation and so forth for school children so that we could accommodate our traditional times for hunting, or the current traditional times for hunting. Yeah, and that's really, really wonderful. Thank you all for these questions. We have 5 minutes break from now on, and we should have coffee. I feel like I heard them during the presentation, and we'll come back in 5 minutes where I will present the next speaker. Thank you. I think everyone who follow online, we're gonna come back in 5 minutes. See you soon.
Has the paper been published? Wonderful. Because in my research, I'm not focusing on indigenous, but I think that more definition, as many definition as of homemaking as possible would be beneficial to my understanding. It's role of food in homemaking, but for immigrants, you know.
I'm just making you both aware that we have. I'm just muting the. Welcome back, everyone. We should be unmuted and we should be ready to start now. Our next presenter is Ms. Linda L. Shikapio, and she is a student at the Customized Master's Program in Indigenous Studies at UQAT. We just had two brilliant speakers pronounce the whole university name, so I will commence to call it UQAT to save my own reputation. And she will present her project on Indigenous women's role in community well-being, UNDRIP implications for the Green Nation of EU HD. And she will also present herself further, so I will give the word to you.
Thank you. All right, I have my... All right, so I'm going to be multitasking. I have 3 screens here, like we always do as Indigenous women, right? Sorry. I'm just going to... I didn't even have my coffee this morning, so bear with me. I'll enjoy it after my presentation. Thank you. All right, Wacha, Kwe, respect to the lands and the people of Greenland. I acknowledge the traditional and ancestral lands of the, excuse me if I can't pronounce it right, Kalaalleq, Nunaat, their history and their ongoing connection to this beautiful land. It's my first time here in Greenland, and I'm really grateful that I'm here with you all. All right. This is, I know a lot of Indigenous people were visual people, so I thought I would share a bit of a portrait of, or snapshots of who I am. First of all, my spirit name is Xkunisquo, means cloud woman, and my legal name is Linda L. Shikapio. I am a daughter, a sister, auntie, a wife. I was a wife, now I'm a widow actually. It's going to be a year since the departure of my late husband. I'm also a mother of 2 fine young men. The first one is 28, and my younger one is 22. I'm also a Gokam, a grandmother of 2 granddaughters. I'm also a friend, a colleague, and a student. I was born and raised in Uishti, which translates the land of the people, a traditional territory and traditional custodians of the homeland of Iuj and Inuj, which means people in my language. It's situated in northern Quebec of James Bay region. I live in my community, the Cree Nation of Mistissini, which means big rock, and it is located in the southeast corner of the largest natural lake in Quebec, which is also known as Mistissini Lake. It is also the second largest and the most present-day developed Cree community. We have 9 Cree communities. I am currently a master's candidate for Indigenous students at UQAT, the one in Val-d'Or. I consider myself as a leader, a speaker, advisor, and a facilitator. My work background consists of community leadership and community engagement. And I'm also an independent entrepreneur as a consultant, which is commonly known, but I consider myself as an advisor, because as an Indigenous woman, we hold knowledge, and I think that would be more appropriate for me to acknowledge myself as an advisor. I have a Bachelor of Arts in Political Science with a concentration in Public Affairs and Policy Analysis, and I graduated from Carleton University. I'm also a counselor for my community. As you can see these pictures, I would like to take this time to honor my ancestors that have come before me. If you look at the picture on the On the right, on the left, the lady with the Gukum scarf there, she has ancestral lineage from Inuit. So I have a bit of Inuit blood in me. So, so my first teachers, who are my parents and grandparents, and I was very fortunate that I was surrounded with that growing up. And they're all gone to the spirit world. And these elders who are in some of the pictures, who are still with us on this Mother Earth, and those, who are still with us on Mother Earth, and I await in anticipation of those elders who are yet to emerge. This is a snapshot of who my tribe or my family are. I have a lot of pictures there, and I was very grounded with our traditional ways, and I was out on the land too as a little girl, so I was very fortunate to be rooted. And my late grandparents, my parents were very, they still practiced and lived out on the land while they were still alive. So, and my mother was always very, always reminding me whenever I would go down south to get my education, she would always tell me, don't forget where you come from. You need to come home for a while and you need to practice your ways. So I'm very grateful for what she taught me. So you see a bit of the moose hide, just taking off the fur, go fishing and just cleaning as you call it, country food. And we love our geese. We have our goosebergs as well. So I am grateful for those before me who have paved the way. I am the next generation. I'm also a daughter of a residential school survivor, which is from Nutawi, means my father. And I am committed to be part of this process in reclaiming our narratives, reconciliation, and healing for and with my fellow Iuj and Inuj, means people. My parents, grandparents, elders, and ancestors and knowledge keepers have anchored and steered me to have a strong sense of my Cree identity, culture, language, beliefs, and our family history. And as such, they all contribute to my sense of who I am and what I mean to others. So the introduction, as we saw in the first slide, I'm a master's candidate. So, and why do I choose this topic and its significance? Well, I had to change a couple of titles. First, I was calling it Reclaiming Our Roles and Responsibilities as Iuj Coach. So, and then I came up with this, and this one was more, I guess you can say, settling well with me. Well-being and healing of Inu Iskoj, which means Cree woman. And I use two dialects in respect for, because we have two dialects in my territory. A path forward to strengthening our families, communities, and nationhood. Inuit, Inuit have been subjected to decades of colonialism, historical trauma, and systemic racism. And specifically, Inuit have been encountering the ongoing intergenerational legacy of colonialism, sexism, and racism. We are now confronted with various disparities that continue to inhabit all areas of our adopted structures and institutions, and more importantly, that affect the well-being and health of our families, communities, and nation in USG, just like other Indigenous people across Canada and other parts of the world. I chose this research because I think it is not only important for our own right as Inuit, but also to provide a general understanding of our adopted structures, systems, and institutions within our governance, and to move forward for the well-being and healing of our communities, our families, and nationhood within our traditional lands of USG and globally. So the cultural role of Indigenous women for well-being. Oh, I forgot to show this. This is my mother, and she was known for this, always cleaning moose hide or caribou hide, and she was very good. So I wanted to show you my my first teacher. So in pursuing this research journey, I will attempt to set the stage to honor the spirit of my ancestors and seek their wisdom to guide us, Inuit back to the traditions of gender equity in our societies. As the role gender can play and further shed light to recover and regain the positive vision of our womanhood, but also in addition to encourage to see the possibilities of how learning about our respected roles as life givers, life educators, as the main teachers, and life nurturers as Inuit, and more importantly, our primary responsibility as Inuit and Inuit to prepare youth for future survival of our people, and applying the traditional ways can help us move into the future for stronger and healthier families, communities, and our nationhood. This is also a great reminder for my people at this history, just looking at how it demonstrated our collectivity when the trappers and hunters, along with their spouses, they came together to stop the construction of the dams that would flood major of our territory within Inuit, as this would have an effect on Innu traditional way of life. I think in resolving many of our social issues, this can also be done in terms of undertaking and the revival of the well-being and healing for our people. So in terms of, this is how I'm going to proceed. It's basically like I'm just introducing like my framework of my research project. So this is how I'm going to proceed with it. So the historical context. This is where I'm going to be focusing. The historical context of a system of cultural genocide will provide an overview of the historical injustices against Indigenous women, as the impacts cannot be understood without consideration of the historical and contemporary colonial context. So here I plan to provide a brief portrait of the historical injustices against Indigenous women, but also to bring understanding the impacts of our well-being and family dynamics. And this will also provide a brief portrait of what changed and how it impacted us from the contact and post-contact, because we are now experiencing those issues, like many of our social issues. So this is a critical piece, and I hold this in my heart. Our Gukamnuj, our grandmothers, showed their strength and resilience that many Indigenous women embodied because of their willpower and determination to survive what colonial policies created to break their spirits. So with this too, the UNDRIP, a framework for Indigenous rights. Briefly, I'm going to identify the key aspects of UNDRIP and its relevance to Indigenous women's rights. I would also add the articles related to traditional medicine and family, and showing how these are relevant to the well-being. And this includes articles 2, 22, 23, 24, and 41. So those are the ones I'll be focusing as well. In terms of the well-being and healing, in our language we call it Miubmatsuan. Miubmatsuan considers not only physical health, but also psychological, social, and political well-being, and recognizes health within the context of land and identity. Miubmatsuan embodies the Cree traditional ways of life as part of our Cree identity. And this is quoted from Anderson. The importance of healing and well-being for Inuit, it is a time to reflect, and we as in Inuit, can no longer put our own needs on the back burner in order to serve the greater good of our families and communities. The other part I was planning to incorporate in my research is a brief portrait of the heartbeat of our communities and its ongoing issues within the various forms of exclusion and discrimination, And the reason why I want to include this is I was a former president for Cree Women of USG and as a spokesperson for the Cree Women. Sorry. So I'm going to try to skim through this. I'm limited with time. So briefly, this is what I'm going to be addressing as well too. This is the onset, I guess, when we saw a lot of our social issues and how it impacted many of our communities. And it's also a foreign policy that we adopted in many of our structures and systems. So, and this is what I'm going to be addressing as well too. And in terms of the key aspects from the UNDRIP, this is where I also want to look at the cultural revival and traditional knowledge. And just looking at for the first next few slides, these are the key aspects of UNDRIP and its relevance to Indigenous women's rights. I will also focus on the role of traditional knowledge and cultural revival in healing is much needed more than ever. I will definitely share some examples of our successful programs and initiatives. And hopefully I will one day come back and share of what I gathered from my research. And also the family and community healing is another key aspect that I want to focus. And education and economic empowerment, this is really key. And we just heard about the presentation, the previous one. So this is something that I want to provide some of the areas there. Oh. And also advocacy and policy. And this is really something that we have to, especially remind our leaders, this is something that UNDRIP can be a catalyst for a policy change and also to influence many ways of what we bring to our communities. And I was going to share, because I had an opportunity to interview 3 Gokaminut grandmothers in my community, and they had their teachings, but I'm not going to be able to do this, so I'm limited with time. But it's something that I will definitely focus on, because we need to, when I'm talking about traditional roles and responsibilities, this is where many of the teachings, and I was very fortunate to hear some of them, and a lot of what they shared is very authentic too. And a lot of those words I didn't even hear. So anyways, it's going to be interesting. And this is my second granddaughter in the picture. That was her walking out ceremony. So, and to end, of course, I'm going to be looking at the challenges and future directions. So when I gather and meet with my fellow Cree women, this is where I'm going to be focusing on the challenges and future directions where we can have a better, collaboration and more unified voice where we can continue moving forward. But I also drafted a Cree care model which will shape and support for our hopeful future, and something that I want to leave as a legacy to the next generation. Something that, because we don't really document anything, and a lot of our teachers, our ancestors, our elders, they're gone. So, and for me, I said to myself, what do I want to leave before I leave this earth? And I said, okay, this is something that I would like to capture, put it, in writing, so the next generation can have something to refer to. So we have no question, and so miigwech, thank you, and merci.
Yes, this has eaten a little bit into the Q&A part, but I think if you have further questions, you can ask her during the break or after this event as well. But I felt the need not to interrupt, but to give her time to speak, because this was a lot of really beautiful and good information for us to have, and I didn't want to just break it up for you, but I had to stand and give a little pressure so you could move a little faster. So I will go on to the first question, and anyone want to start off this? No one at the moment? Yes, it is also quite a lot of information to digest and to move through. And I want to quickly address UNDRIP is the UN Declaration for Indigenous Peoples' Rights. So, so that there's no complications about that. And it is very important to use a mechanism that the United Nations already have approved and use it to fight for our rights. So I'm very glad that you're looking into it and using it. Yes. Are there any questions from the audience at the moment? Yes?
Linda, thank you so much for your presentation. That was very giving. Maybe it's not a question, but I noticed you mentioned the Miwachuan, and I thought that was very beautiful. It's more like not just only the physical things, but also the immaterial things that we have in our communities and in our culture, which is a traditional knowledge as well. And I thought you are going to focus on the challenges and future directions, right? Do you include the Miwachuan as part of your future directions? And if so, do you have any, not necessarily conclusions, but maybe visions of how you would like to capture that in your project?
Yeah, so, yeah, because and that's the thing, you know, like I plan to do this research and utilize many of our concepts. Mi'kmaq is really, you know, it encompasses many of our things, like who we are and how we bring balance in our life. And, you know, it's about well-being, the healing. And, you know, of course, it's going to extract many of our roles and responsibilities because that's part of Mi'kmaq. So this is where I, you know, like, and that's why I was saying at the beginning, you know, I kept fiddling around with my title, and I was more focused on reclaiming our traditional roles and responsibilities. Then I ended up with the well-being and healing. But it really, you know, I believe that we need to go back to how we were, because we had our ways of how we functioned in our families. And the way I see it too in our community, like when we see a lot of our children or youth acting up, I asked myself as a mother, you know, where are we falling short? And who are our resources in our community? It's our elders. You know, we go to them. We ask for them for their guidance. So I thought this would be a good way, you know, if I'm all about healing. And I think this is just a small piece, you know, for the healing of our nation. So I thought, okay, this is something that I want to focus, you know, because it's really about Mi'kmaq, and everybody, you know, in my territory, they know what it means, you know. So it's just a reminder of it.
Hi, Koyanak, for your presentation. My name is Mallory, and I'm a settler Haole researcher from Montana. And I work with Dakota and Nakota communities there. And I was wondering, in your interviews with grandmothers in your community, first of all, what language did you do them in, and how do you analyze them? And also, are you planning on doing more interviews with other people?
Yeah, actually, my first semester at UCAT, we had to do this ethics course, and so we were given that space to, you know, experience how to proceed with the interviews and all that. So I speak my language, Cree language, so I'm able to connect with our elders. But of course, the next generation, I had harder time to really. But it's really about, and you know, when you interview elders, they're storytellers, right? So you really have to pay attention. And it was very time consuming for me when it came to transcribing. But it was really a good experience, and I look forward to, you know, doing the groundwork for my research. And that's the fortunate thing that I'm able to speak, and, you know, unfortunately I can't write my language, but I understand and I can communicate. So, and it's going to be very, you know, because it brings you another perspective too. It, you know, like I said, Mi'kmaq, and it's going to encompass. And I really believe that it's really going to come out beautiful from this research, that will, hopefully our leaders will be, you know, welcoming this information of what the women and elders were saying, you know. So we do have that relationship, but it's not really at par yet because of our structures, our systems, you know. So that's why I'm motivated to do this. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And we have 5-minute break again. And I put these in a lot because people can get the water and everything. And again, in 5 minutes, we'll start the next session with Dr. Susie Basel. So I will see you soon. Welcome back, everyone. We're going to start again. Thank you so much. And our next speaker is Dr. Susie Basel, and she comes from the Atikamekw community of Motati in Quebec, Canada. And she has a bachelor degree and a master's degree in anthropology. And she's a professor at UCAT. Yeah. She's a member of the steering committee of Dialogue Aboriginal Peoples Research and Knowledge Network. And among many, many things that she has done, she has also set up the research laboratory on Indigenous women's issues, Mikwetisu at UCAT in 2017. Dr. Basile was involved in the development process of the Assembly of First Nations of Quebec and Labrador's research protocol. And she developed the guidelines for research with Aboriginal women for Quebec Native Women Association. And she has actively participated in the creation of the toolkit of research principles in Aboriginal context, ethics, respect, fairness, reciprocity, collaboration, and culture. Since June 1st, 2016, she's a member of UCAT's Research Ethics Board as an Indigenous representative as well. So without further ado, I welcome Dr. Susie Basil. I will keep welcoming her, but she is coming. She's on her way. Maybe my presentation wasn't grand enough. Ta-da! Dr. Susie Basil, everyone, welcome.
Sorry about that. Good morning, everyone. So, okay, this is not fine. Okay, that's good. So the presentation I will do this morning, it's about the access of midwifery services for Indigenous community in Quebec, Canada. And it's a research that we just finished a few weeks ago, and the report will be released today. It's a pure coincidence, but that's life. So I can share the link with you to have access to the English version of this report if you wish after the conference. First of all, this initiative is coming from the action plan developed by the Quebec government in 2017. This action plan says that one of its measures aimed to develop access to the services of midwife in non-treaty Indigenous community in Quebec. Linda quickly spoke about that. There is 3 Indigenous groups in Quebec that are under agreement, and the 9 other ones are not yet. So this research focuses on the communities that are not under any treaties. So in order to address this measure and the critical need to improve health care for Indigenous women, the Ministry of Health approached me and my research chair to carry out a research on access to midwifery services with Indigenous community in Quebec. So this research was held in collaborations with the First Nations of Quebec and Labrador Health and Social Services Commission, and it started in 2021, in January 2021. The main objective of this research was to produce knowledge that would improve access to midwifery services for Indigenous women and families in non-treaty communities in Quebec. It also aims to understand the needs of Indigenous women in terms of culturally relevant and safe perinatal follow-ups, their facilitating factors, and the obstacle encountered in accessing them. The findings were particularly aimed at providing Indigenous authorities with tools for the development of midwifery services so that they can meet the needs and aspirations of the various Indigenous communities in Quebec. The health of Indigenous women in Quebec and Canada is marked by colonialism. Colonial policies target Indigenous women in many ways, either through control of their bodies, the devaluations of their role within their societies, the abolitions of their role as educators through the impositions of residential schools, and the non-recognitions of their place within their traditional land. Today, Indigenous women are affected by these numerous attempts at eradication. Indigenous midwifery's knowledge, traditionally present throughout the Americas and elsewhere around the world, such as here in Greenland, has been devaluated in favor of biomedicine and the over-medicalizations of pregnancies. Traditional birthing ritual have been stigmatized, and the Indigenous experience of motherhood has been adversely affected. This creates significant difficulties for pregnant women, notably by the obligations to travel long distance for pregnancy follow-ups and to give birth, isolated from their family, their community, and their land. So we, of course, did a scoping review, literature review. And what it says is, although access to perinatal care services is largely understated in the available literature on the challenges and realities facing Indigenous women in Quebec, is it still possible to state that significant gaps still needed to be bridged? Approaches to care in hospital that don't meet their needs, and a difficult relationship with the healthcare system due to negative experience indicates that many Indigenous women avoid health services in Quebec altogether. Women with high-risk pregnancies due to various indicators such as gestational diabetes, stillbirth, infant mortality, and so on, require closer medical monitoring. This need for close monitoring, combined with the geographical distance between urban services center and their places of residence, and the absence of local services, implies that they are often have to travel far from their homes on multiple occasions. The mapping exercise included in the appendix of this report clearly demonstrate this reality. We will come back on that at the end. One of the proposed solutions for improving access to perinatal care services is the implementations of cultural safety measures, a wide-ranging concept that emphasizes the needs to develop culturally relevant and safe health services for Indigenous women. What I don't say here is that our scoping review also brought us to Cree Nation and Inuit people midwifery services in northern Quebec, but unfortunately, a matter of time, I'm not going to talk about much about it this morning. So the data collections was made with 19 First Nations communities, plus 6 Indigenous organizations that closely work with these communities. We had also 2 testimonies of people who works closer to midwifery services, for a total of 27 interviews, 22 in French, because as you can imagine and hear, the majority of the people in Quebec speaks French, and English as second language, and Indigenous communities will have their own language, plus will speak French or English, and sometimes the 3 languages altogether. So it's a challenge for all of us. So in total, we interviewed 32 participants, because sometimes the interview was done with 2 persons, a nurse or a midwife or director of health. And we give a sequential number coding to each of the interview that we did. Just some challenges to encounter during the data collection. First of all, the staff of these communities and organizations are very, very busy. Strong demand addressed to the health department of these Indigenous communities and organizations. So we were kind of lucky that they gave us an hour of their time. They are receiving internal and external requests like in a daily basis. It's totally crazy how they are busy. Of course, their work is overload. And we also conducted this research in a COVID context, so we had to cancel many times the meeting and the travel we had to do and reschedule it in another time. So it was something to deal with. So some of the results of this interview data analysis, we can say that there is a disparity of perinatal services from one Indigenous community or organizations to another. It could be very different from an area to another one because of their geographical situation and linguistic barrier. A lack of awareness of midwifery services, quite generalized. Many nurses and health director heard about it, know what midwifery is, but they were missing information about their actual task, and the right to access to these services. So we had also, in the meantime, we were doing interview, sharing with them lots of information about what it could be to have midwifery services in their communities. Also, we find out that there is a general mistrust toward the healthcare system. And we can say that through various manifestations, such as missing babies in the health system in Quebec, and also many cases of imposed sterilizations, amongst others. Also, we find out that there are challenges in terms of transport for pregnancy, follow-up, and childbirth. One of the main problems that women and families are facing is who will take care of the other children during their absence, because for some of them, they have to leave their community for weeks before giving birth. They're also facing a persistent prejudice among staff, medical staff, and we had many examples of that. Unfortunately, Indigenous women, Indigenous people are still facing these attitude and prejudice and racist behaviors in many areas, including health services. And we have many examples to share if we need to talk further about that. The other challenge is communication issues. I mentioned that a few minutes ago, that for most of the Indigenous people we work with, they have to deal on a daily basis with a second or even a third language context. And also the fact that most of the time the women don't have any accompaniment or access to interpreters in their language when they have to be in a hospital or clinic. The other point is the calendar of cultural activities is not readily compatible with the orchestrations of medical appointments. Many women were telling us, I would like to go berry picking, but my appointment for my follow-up, it's in the middle of that specific week, and they don't want to change it. They don't want to, or it became very complicated to have a rescheduled appointment to at least be able to make a mix of traditional activities and medical follow-up. Other results here is perinatal services are available in the city, yes, but remain inadequate for Indigenous women and their families. Medical staff's lack of understanding about the presence of extended family during follow-up care and childbirth, and this is an issue because many women would like to have their extended family with them when the child arrives to be able to do some traditional ceremonies, but it's not possible, or they will face the negative answers from the medical staff. A threat of birth alert. A birth alert is when the social services are called when the baby is born. Sometimes the staff of the hospital will presume that the woman is under drugs or alcohol, and they will then do this kind of intervention, thinking that they should take care of that baby instead of the mother. So it's a big threat that many women are facing, presuming that maybe the social services will be at the door as soon as they give birth. Another challenge is the financial and accommodation difficulties. Like I said earlier, many women have to be away from their house, their home for weeks, so they'll have to live in the city, sometimes in hotels or shelters, but still it could be complicated, and they don't have reimbursement for all the expenses related to their time in the city. And one last challenge is the solitude and stress that they are facing. It was a very generalized answer that we got. Lack of familiarity with midwifery services, I said that earlier, but considerable interest in their implementation. Many people told us, yes, we would like to have these services, but how should we start? What should we do? And also the fact that we have to deal with this philosophy underlying this practice is linked to the principle of informed choice regarding medical intervention, childbirth, and type of follow-up desired. And the people that we work, we talk with, were saying that maybe midwifery services could be better than the medical care, because then women will have a choice at least to just the way they want to give birth. Training program and information tour requested. This is what the informator told us, that campaign of knowledge about midwifery should be done. Space for the return of indigenous ancestral practices long perceived as less good or even dangerous. And many people that work with us told us that this perception should be reversed, should be changed. Certain practices have endured and are valued today. They share with us what the kind of tradition that we should make effort to make sure that it remains alive, such as the use of traditional medicines, childbirth-related ceremonies and ritual. We just saw some picture earlier from Linda's presentation. We talk here about a ceremony called the newborn, the first steps, the indigenous language naming, disposal of the placenta and umbilical cord, and also the use of the misaspizon and tikinagan, which is wooden board to carry the baby. So here's a quote to wrap this thought. The role of midwives is pivotal, given that their practices were once rooted in the land. They can also be catalyzed for the return of birthing to the land, while providing cultural safe support and accompaniment. So this is what tikinagan and misaspizons are, very cute. And these practices have been prohibited by the physicians for a long, long time, and now they are coming back and more valued than before, luckily. The report ends with 30 recommendations. I'm not going to go into that in details, but we can see that we gather the main recommendations that could be put in place in favor of midwifery services return. I will end with cartography, an exercise of mapping that we produced to illustrate the travel itinerary imposed on pregnant Indigenous women in Quebec. You will see here only the communities that participated into the research, not all of them. And we are talking about ideal travel itinerary for pregnancy follow-up and what we call normal delivery. So just showing this map here for one of the community. So women have to be 27 days away from their house during a pregnancy. And they have to travel 13 times to the next town, which is, in this case, 125 kilometers away on the forestry gravel road. And that's the dots are showing the numbers of days that they have to spend in the city to get their services. And the thing is, we also know that most of the women don't do all these follow-ups because of the the complicated situation, the cost, and the time, and their job also. Most of them are working. And they also have some issues with, like I said earlier, the family left behind. Here we have the same data divided in 9 months of regular pregnancy.
Officially 5 minutes over time.
Oh, am I over time? Okay, then I'm done with the last map here, just to show you all the arrows represent all the travel back and forth that the women has to do from their community to the next town to get services. So it's the final words is services should be offered in their communities as much as possible, so they will have more follow-up and less trouble. And voilà. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And chillingly familiar stories we just heard, at least for us from Greenland. So any questions, any thoughts to start it off with? Not at the moment. But I can say that it is something that we recognize here in Greenland as well, the fact that many have to travel to the bigger cities to give birth. And it doesn't really make sense for many.
I saw that in the newspaper this morning from Kalktok. The women have to be sent over here in Nuuk to give birth. Yeah.
Many people are born in Nuuk because of that.
They have to wait a month here in town? Okay.
Yeah, if you're gonna give birth, you have to travel a month before the term of your birth thing. So it's a month before. So if you have another children, you have to leave them for a month to give birth, and you're not allowed to travel around with your other kids or with your partners. But there came not a law, but there came that you can you can apply to have your partner with you if you are a member of a certain
Oh, I see, union. Okay.
So yeah, it's
Yeah,
just
we face the same challenges.
yeah, it's just copy pasting.
Thank you.
Og så var det lige herovre.
So much fuss for a short comment. There was a report made this year. It came out. Tina knows more about it since she was also one of the authors about the perception of the midwifery services in Greenland. And one of the conclusions out of many very important ones was definitely the cultural safety of the current system and the lack thereof, especially in terms of being able to be close to your, not just close family, but also extended family when you gave birth. So it's just a very clear parallel.
Yeah.
And this report came out, I think, this year? Yeah, so it's brand new.
Okay, so hopefully we can share this report and make it available to our respective students so they can have more and more, and also recent research results to add to their work.
I had one question whispered into my ear, and it was about your experiences in Canada when it comes to the forced sterilization of the Indigenous women there, and what you have, if you can talk about it a bit.
Okay. I'm going to make a presentation on that issue in about 2 weeks in another conference. So if you would like to hear more about that, then I will do that again and again. We just finished this research in Quebec about less than a year ago, 10 months ago. And we interviewed 35 women that were faced or sterilizations or obstetrical violence, or both of them. And for the first time of the history, at least in Quebec, the Quebec part of Canada, these cases have been documented. There were any official document about that before last year, except a few archives were mentioning part of stories, but it was not that clear, I would say. And this work just joined the work that has been done in many other provinces in Canada where many Indigenous women were sterilized in the 50s, 60s, 70s, and the most recent case is 2019. So this story, these experiences seems to not be over yet, let's say it like that. And the Senator Yvonne Boyer, who pushed as a senator, pushed this file, and a new bill should be adopted in Canada in the next few months. She made the calculations of 12,000 women
so far have been sterilized in Canada. We probably think that this number is under the reality. It's probably much more than that, but so far the documentation permitted to establish the number at 12,000. So, yeah, sad part of our colonial history as well.
Thank you so much, everyone. We have, again, the 4-minute break. See you in 4 minutes. There we go. Our next speaker is already beside me. Way ahead already. Dr. Sébastien Brodeur-Girard is a lawyer and a professor at the School of Indigenous Studies at UCAT. And he teaches in the law of Indigenous peoples and in contemporary Indigenous issues. He holds a doctorate in history, one of us, and worked for several years in this field. He is currently writing a doctoral thesis in law at the University of Montreal on the reconciliation of Indigenous legal systems and Western state law. Very interesting. From 2017 to 2019, he participated as a lawyer and co-director of the research team in the work of the Vienne Commission, and he is a member of the Quebec Bar, as well as the Research and Knowledge Network relating to Indigenous Peoples Dialogue, the research team on Indigenous cosmopolitics, and the research laboratory on issues relating to Indigenous women. He is also a member of the editorial board of the journal Research Amerindies or Quebec. And I will give the floor to you.
Thank you. Oh, I just... Thank you very much. Thank you for the organization of this great seminar. I'm very glad to be here. And for this presentation, we'll stay in Canada, in Val d'Or, more precisely a small mining town in northern Quebec. Quebec, which is, as Susie said, the mostly French-speaking province of Canada. And it is worth noting that our university, UCAT, University of Quebec in Abitibi-Témiscamingue, have a campus there with the First People pavilion where my colleagues and me work. So I'll begin with the telling of the events that happened in this region about 10 years ago. And we have here a picture of some of the women that we'll be talking about. So in the early days of spring 2014, Cindy Rupert House, an Anishinaabe woman from the Picogan community in Abitibi, Quebec, went missing, sparking a tragedy reminiscent of countless cases involving missing and murdered Indigenous women across Canada. Her family and friends were disheartened by the lack of police assistance in the quest to locate her. And so you see where Val d'Or is in Quebec. Whoops, this one. So the concerning accounts from these affected individuals were compiled by journalists from Enquête, an investigative program of the public broadcaster Radio-Canada. And to the journalists' surprise, approximately a dozen Indigenous women in Val d'Or also revealed instances of sexual abuse and violence allegedly perpetrated by certain members of the Sûreté du Québec, which is the provincial police force. It is noteworthy that the women sharing their experiences with the journalists were in vulnerable situations, with some dealing with homelessness, substance abuse, engaging in sex work sometimes, and encountering various legal issues. The broadcast of the report in October 2015 triggered a response. Some Val d'Or police officers were suspended, igniting many reactions, some in support of the Indigenous victims and others supporting the police. In the months following the report, tensions escalated in Val d'Or, and the credibility of the women who spoke out against police abuses was questioned by supporters of the police officers. Simultaneously, demands from the Indigenous community emerged for a credible inquiry into the situation. Initially, the government undertook a standard police investigation. An independent observer was appointed to oversee the investigation. Subsequently, another report from the Enquête program highlighted that strained relations between Indigenous peoples and police services were not exclusive to Val-d'Or, but extended throughout Quebec with various allegations of abuse and violence. Following an extensive police investigation, it was concluded that there was insufficient evidence beyond a reasonable doubt to press charges against the police officers accused of misconduct. The Director of Criminal and Penal Prosecutions clarified that the absence of charges did not negate the truthfulness of the woman's testimonies. The problem, in his opinion, was that the described events took place some years ago, mostly at night, that some women didn't clearly saw their attackers, that many of them were intoxicated at the time, and the trauma of the assault prevented them from remembering clearly the situation, etc. In summary, their testimonies were considered credible in many respects, but not sufficient for pressing charges. The independent observer reported an impartial conduct in the police investigation, but flagged discriminatory police practices and systemic racism within law enforcement toward Indigenous communities. In response to the continued dissatisfaction and renewed tensions in the region of Val-d'Or, by the end of 2016, the Quebec government authorized a public inquiry commission chaired by retired Judge Jacques Vien, which Susie and I worked with the commission. So the public inquiry, the title was the Public Inquiry Commission on Relations between Indigenous Peoples and Certain Public Services in Quebec, Listening, Reconciliation and Progress. Though originally triggered because of the situation of the women in Val-d'Or and their interaction with the police, the commission had a broader mandate to investigate and recommend measures to prevent and eliminate violence and discriminatory practices in public services offered to Indigenous peoples. The targeted public services included police services, but also justice, correctional services, health and social services, and youth protection. The mandate encompassed the entirety of Quebec, not solely Val-d'Or, and for the preceding 15 years. So the Commission held 38 weeks of hearings across Quebec, nearly 700 hours, hearing from 765 witnesses, in addition of gathering 423 written statements and 1,379 pieces of evidence. In its 2019 report, it highlighted the systemic discrimination experienced by Indigenous individuals in their interactions with public services and issued 142 calls to action, emphasizing the need to support self-determination of Indigenous peoples and calling for the implementation of the UNDRIP, the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People. Despite the generally positive reception of the final report by Indigenous organizations and communities, it notably lacked in specifically addressing the experiences of the Indigenous women of Val-d'Or. Despite media reports, an independent observer overseeing a police inquiry and a public inquiry commission, there was no indication of any justice for those victims. Furthermore, some of these women continued to face harassment from the officers in Val-d'Or. This situation raises a critical question. Would the response have been the same if the victims were not vulnerable Indigenous women? So to better understand the reasons behind this, we will now examine the various processes that in principle should allow individuals such as the woman from Val-d'Or to seek justice. We will briefly look into the police ethics systems in Quebec, then the justice system, inquiry commissions, and finally the recourse to international law, but very briefly. So in Quebec, the Commissioner for Police Ethics, an independent governmental body, has facilitated the lodging of complaints against Quebec police officers code of ethics breaches since the 1990s. But however, human rights organizations criticize the process. They highlight the short time limit for filing a complaint, restricted to 1 year following the incident, thereby preventing, for example, the women from Val d'Or from addressing past incidents. Moreover, the mandatory conciliation process, where victims have to confront the accused officers before any further investigation, is often seen as intimidating, discouraging many from reporting. Prior to 2016, incidents involving injuries or fatalities following police interactions were investigated by other police forces, raising concerns about conflicts of interest and the impartiality of investigations. So in 2016, they created the Independent Investigation Bureau aimed to address these issues. However, doubts about the institution's independence persist, since many of its investigators have law enforcement backgrounds, which brings into question their neutrality. Additionally, the Bureau's investigation process lacks transparency, leading to prolonged inquiries, and its limited understanding of Indigenous communities' realities contributes to the underutilization of complaint procedures by Indigenous groups, further eroding trust in the system. Ultimately, it appears that there are no institutions tailored to Indigenous realities that to enable them to file complaints regarding police conducts. Problems persist within the justice system. Indigenous communities in Quebec hold deep mistrust in the state justice system, perceiving it as ineffectual in addressing in addressing underlying issues with accusations and providing proper victim support. Extended legal delays exacerbate these concerns. In the Val d'Or case, challenges surrounding the burden of proof faced by complainants are evident. The Canadian adversarial justice system aims to unravel truth by weighing conflicting versions of events, typically favoring external evidence or witness accounts. However, in cases devoid of witnesses, such as sexual assaults, the situation often devolves into a he said, she said scenario. Here, individual credibility becomes pivotal. An acute disparity surfaces between police, predominantly white men in authoritative roles, and marginalized Indigenous women. Despite claims of neutrality, the justice system tends to grant more credibility to law enforcement professionals than to individuals representing marginalized groups, like women, like Indigenous people, those experiencing homelessness, and individuals with substance abuse issues. Even when these women's accounts are deemed credible, the justice system frequently deems their credibility insufficient to meet the onus of proof required, especially in criminal cases demanding proof beyond a reasonable doubt. This standard is nearly unattainable for the women under discussion. So what about inquiry commissions? While inquiry commissions uncover systemic issues, they cannot file specific charges or deliver verdicts. Their role primarily lies in explaining situation and proposing recommendations, albeit without the capacity to target specific individuals. Though these commissions offer suggestions for systemic improvement, they aren't the most apt for ensuring direct justice for Indigenous women who suffer from police violence. When women present their narrative before the commission, the accused officers can also state their side, leading to a cross-examination that reopens questions regarding the credibility of all involved peoples. And I'll go directly to the international law. Would that be a solution? The fact is, seeking justice for Indigenous women through international law necessitates the precondition of exhausting first all available remedies within domestic law. And for individuals from marginalized communities, this often entails a lengthy, challenging, and frequently inaccessible pathway. The procedures involved tend to be complex, demanding financial resources and legal expertise, often beyond the reach of many indigenous individuals. This leaves indigenous women in a scenario where international law does not offer a clear path to remedy or justice, though international human rights instruments like UNDRIP can have a transformative impact that can help to change things, but only on the long term. So in conclusion, the Canadian public institutions, notably the judicial system, inherently favors certain groups. The majority, those in positions of power, and individuals with more resources. For Indigenous women, accessing justice is fraught with difficulties due to a history of discrimination, distrust in Canadian institutions, and numerous socio-cultural barriers. Language and cultural discrepancies complicate communication alongside a lack of resources and proper support, systemic judicial issues, and an overwhelming sense of abandonment by the legal structure. To improve access to justice for Indigenous women in Val-d'Or and others in similar situations, suggested strategies would include essential reforms to the judicial system, such as culturally tailored procedures and educating judicial staff about Indigenous realities. Additionally, increasing resources and support involving Indigenous communities in the justice process, raising awareness, implementing recommendations from inquiry commissions, and recognizing and respecting Indigenous rights are critical. These solutions necessitate a multifaceted approach and collaborative efforts between authorities, Indigenous organizations, human rights advocacy groups, and civil society to bring about enduring change and ensure fair access to justice for Indigenous women. So, there is still a lot of work to do. Thank you, miigwech.
Okay, hello everyone, and I'm going to start by introducing our next speaker. Dr. Tenna Jensen has a PhD degree in history from the University of Copenhagen. Again, one of us. Sorry. She has helped start up, run, and briefly head the Center for Humanistic Health Research. She has experience from various projects, among others, and among them is the Center for Healthy Aging and the Research and Development Project Arctic Aging. In 2021, she founded the Elisabeth Center for Arctic Welfare together with Stephen Arnfjord. And Dr. Jensen is currently heading the independent study of contraceptive practices in Greenland from 1960 to 1991, also known as the IUD scandal. And I will give the word to her now. Qoyana.
Qoyan. Thank you. Yeah, so today I will be giving a brief presentation on the work that we do on the impartial investigation of the IUD case and other contraceptive practices in Greenland and in boarding schools in Denmark with Greenlandic students in the years from 1960 to 1991. I will be starting out by just briefly explaining what an impartial investigation is, because Sebastian, he spoke about it before. We were also into sort of commissions and investigations. And the thing about this project and the way it differs from free research is that the problem statement or the aim of the investigation is determined by the authorities issuing the investigation. And the impartial investigations often aim to uncover certain specified events or key decisions or phenomena in society. The researchers working on the impartial investigations are usually appointed to the assignment. And the results are published at the end of the study in reports. where when you do research projects as a researcher that you sort of start and initialize, you can often sort of publish along the way, and the theoretical frameworks that you put in can be sort of clear and determine the way forward in the research project. The impartial investigations aim to uncover what has occurred at a certain time or place or in a society. So there is sort of that difference. And also I would like to address that the investigation has just begun. So unlike the previous presentations, there will be no results in this one. So the background for this particular investigation, it started a couple of years ago where a single woman came forward publicly and shared her personal history and story about having an IUD inserted without giving personal consent in 1976 when she was 14 years of age. In 2022, the Danish podcast Spiralkampagnen was released by the Danish national television broadcast, once again bringing attention to the practice of IUD insertion in Greenland during the 1960s and 1970s. In the autumn of 2022, the Danish and Greenlandic government agreed to initiate the independent inquiry into the matter to uncover what had taken place. And the inquiry began in May 30th this year and is scheduled to be completed by May 30th, 2025. So in about 1.5 years' time. So this is sort of a slide with a lot of text on it, but it specifies this is taken from the commissary of the inquiry, and the aim of the inquiry is to uncover the historical context for the contraceptive practices in Greenland, which began in the 1960s, including the IUD case. It aims to uncover the decision-making processes, the initiation, the ongoing implementation and adaptation of this initiative and other contraceptive practices. The inquiry must include the considerations, decisions and actions taken by the relevant authorities, organizations and individuals involved in this. The investigation must also focus on the implementation of the initiative, how it was implemented over time and across the Greenlandic health districts and for the different age groups. The investigation must also investigate the legal, administrative and health-related framework at the time for the use of IUDs and other contraceptive practices, both in Greenland, but also on the boarding schools in Denmark that had Greenlandic students. So the inquiry is located here at the university in the Center for Arctic Welfare and also at the Center for Public Health in Greenland and University of Southern Denmark. The project group is made up, and I will have pictures of all of us in a second, by a number of researchers who together covers the requirements for the researchers working on this that is set out in the terms of reference for this inquiry. And the organizations involved is the the Center for Public Health in Greenland, the National Institute of Public Health, University of Southern Denmark, the University of Copenhagen, and Rigsarkivet or the Danish National Archive. And this is us. So it's me on the top left corner. Then we have Gitte Adler-Reimer, who's director of this university. We have Inge-Lise Olesen, which is a project coordinator employed here and at the Center for Public Health in Greenland. We have Janne Rotmar Hermann, who is professor in law at University of Copenhagen. Mette Seidelin, senior researcher at Rigsarkivet. Inge Høst-Seiding, who's head of institute here at Ilisimatusarfik. We have Naja Karina Stenholt, who is researcher at the Center for Public Health in Greenland, University of Southern Denmark. Bonnie Jensen, who is assistant professor here at Ilisimatusarfik. Kirsten Nystrup, who is a senior consultant at the Center for Public Health in Greenland, and Maja Christiansen, who is also a senior consultant at Center for Public Health in Greenland. So the way that we work on this inquiry is that we perform document studies of the published materials relating to contraceptive practices during this period of time. And it is a rather long period of time, so that means that there are quite a lot of published documents that we are looking into. We are also performing archival studies of the relevant archives in Greenland and Denmark. And one of the things that is important to know when you do history on the modern Greenland during this period of time is that not much research has been conducted beforehand. So what is in the archives, where they are, and sort of the knowledge about the empirical materials available to us is scarce. So a lot of what we do during this investigation and hopefully we'll be doing in years to come is also to gain much more knowledge about what do we actually have documented for this period of time. So we're working to look into all the relevant archives in this matter. We're also collecting testimonies as part of this work. And we are collecting testimonies both here, but also in Denmark. And the testimonies that we are collecting are by the affected women and their personal experiences with contraceptive practices that can be IUDs or other types of contraception. And we're also collecting the experiences of health staff and other relevant persons that have been in one way or another affected by or involved in these practices. So the timeline of the investigation is that it is now 2023 and we have commenced the work. We have started receiving testimonies, and we have started our historical studies. In 2024, sort of over the summer, we will finish the collection of testimonies and move on to the next phase, which is the analysis phase, where we will look into both the documents and the testimonies that we have received. We will also start the preparation of the report, which is due May 30th, 2025. All the information about us can be found on our website and our Facebook page. So these are the two places where we put out the information that we sort of put out during our work. So the latest news about where we will visit to collect testimonies will be available on our website.
Yeah, thank you very much. And we now open the floor for questions or comments to the coming week. that is very, very important for us here in Greenland at the very least. All right, here we go.
Thank you for your presentation. I was wondering about the time period, the 1960s to the 1990s. Why do you start in the 1960s? Is there like a trigger date or a policy that was in place, or just wondering a little bit about that time period?
Is it on? Yeah. About the sort of the beginning of the time period, the people making sort of the commission for this have set that time period. And since we have not been in the room, the researchers performing this, sort of the immediate start date is, I think it is set to include the entire 1960s, because some of the women stepping forward have mentioned this period in time. The end date, the 1991, is defined as the health care system was brought home to Greenland at the 1st of January 1992. So with sort of 1991, that concludes the period of time where the health care system was taken care of from Denmark. So it was handed back to Greenland in 1992. So that is the end date of the investigation. I hope that answers.
Jeg tager det på dansk. Jeg har lyttet til nogle af det her podcast om spiralkampagnen. Der sagde de noget om, at det ikke kunne finde nogen, at der var mørklægning. Altså det kunne ikke finde nogen skrivende eller et eller andet sted. Men mærkeligt nok, mens vi læste havde Mosa i vores linje, der moderne samfunds linje, der fik vi læst om spiralkampagnen gemt ind under hos entreprenører, der har skrevet deres ændringer i Grønland. Altså det var som om, det vidste de godt indbyrdes, om man er entreprenør eller lærer, eller han nævnte det kort, ham forfatteren, om spiralsagen. Så at skal der så være, altså spørgsmålet er måske ikke rettet til dig. Efter 1991, så kender vi også nogen til, der har fået sat spiral op uden at vidste det. Har du hørt noget om der skulle være en undersøgelse? Eller?
Okay, so quickly translating it first to English and then answering it in English, and we can always talk afterwards as well in Greenlandic. The question and the comment were about the fact that material was available, written material about what has been happening by Danish entrepreneurs who had been here in Greenland and had written about how women were inserted with IUDs. So that there had already been written accounts of this, despite what the podcast had mentioned, where they said that there was no material available. So that's what she wanted to include. And then she asked about the time period after 1991, because we do have a lot of accounts of women who have gotten sterilized through different ways from 1992 to now. And we have our own inquiry into this at the moment. And you can still contact Landslægen. Yeah. Our main doctor. Yeah. We'll come with the proper term later on, I guess. It just slipped my mind. But yeah, he is actually taking these cases, so you can even, if it happened in that time period, you can contact him, because usually what happens is you can only contact him and his department if the case is less than 5 years old or 10 years old, depending on what it is. So many of these cases are too old, but he has opened up, the government has opened up that people who has experienced sterilization from 1992 to now are able to come forward and ask for compensation or so forth. So, yeah. Yes, National Physician General. That is the word. I think main doctor sounds pretty cool, though. Yeah, yeah. Any actual questions? Yeah, Anna. I had cake.
Hi, Mallory again. So you actually just mentioned reparations, but what are the anticipated, in the conclusion, what are the anticipated options for compensation, reparations? What is on the table right now?
We do the research, and then we hand in the report. And then whatever happens after that is up for someone else to decide.
Okay. Any other question? Okay, yeah, I see you.
Thank you. Well, having been in an inquiry commission, I found it very interesting to see how you put all that in place. And I was wondering, beside the Facebook site and the website, what are the strategies you use to publicize the inquiry so that people who might be interested to have lend their testimony can know about it?
We will have, we advertise in Facebook, and we are also visiting towns. So we travel around, both here and in Denmark, collecting testimonies. And we will also have a campaign on the radio and the television, which we're launching here sometime in November, where hopefully information about how you can hand in your testimony will be made available to everyone in the country. So that is how we try to make sort of the different possibilities visible. And it is possible to hand in a testimony by phoning us. We have phone lines that you can call, or you can give a written testimony through sort of the portal, the public portal, which is called Soslistivik. And then you can give your testimony to one of the researchers when we visit towns across the country.
Yeah. I have a question, because I know we have a lot of students who are interested in this area. Is there any way that you are thinking about involving students at the university here in your work?
This is a difficult project to do that, because we are dealing with people's personal information, and we are also getting access to archival materials that are not publicly accessible. So on this particular case, it's not possible for us to involve students, because we have to work and we have to respect the informations of people and the personal nature of this cause. Yeah. But in other cases, I mean, in other projects in the Welfare Center, we are very happy to involve students in our research projects. So if anyone is interested in doing research sort of in the social field or in the health-related fields, please write us an email, because there are always options to get involved in research, but not in this particular one.
My name is Philip. Thank you very much for this interesting presentation. And my question would be, since this is a sensitive topic and it can have an ending at a court, maybe, how are you keeping the personal information? How are you going to share that information with, for example, a court later on? How can the victim decide on that?
In the inquiry, we are not, as Sebastian said, we are not working with the individual cases. When people hand in their testimonies, they are being anonymized and will be part of our analysis. But sort of the individual cases is not what we will be working with. We will be handling the context, the discourse, the decisions, the implementation. Of course, methodologically, through collecting individual stories, but we will not be tracing individual stories, if that makes sense.
Yes, that's exactly what I asked. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Can you tell us if any Danish young women were also targeted by this campaign or not?
I mean, in Denmark, or we don't know. Currently, we don't know. So,
It would be very interesting to know whether if there was any possibilities for. There are some documentary programs on DR, Denmark Radio, about the history between Greenland and Denmark. And actually, I think it was one of the episodes that can confirm how this project started. I forgot the first thing I thought about. The numbers. Unfortunately, I have forgotten the other thing. Maybe I might get on it later. Sorry.
I can come with additional information in that the government has been very clear in the information that they have given out that if you want to get any kind of compensation or anything, it's not through this inquiry you'll get it, that you will have to also refer to another portal. So they have tried to make it very clear that if you want to work for individual compensation or something like that, you will have to go through that. But I know for a fact that the Human Rights Council and the National Institute for Human Rights in Denmark have criticized this heavily because it should never be the victim that should ask for recompense here. So there is a lot of things going on just by that alone. And you remembered.
That was a certain number of those victims have been.
They have taken the legal way and actually gone to the courts.
Yeah. Because they are afraid of the time would go past, so some of the victims might not get any compensation. So they've been seeking for compensation. I think it was 16 or 67. I don't remember. But there's a case going on meanwhile, I think.
Yes, there's actually some citizens suing the Danish state at the moment regarding this issue. So there's several aspects to this case already. Very interesting, but not exactly questions for you at the moment. If there's no other questions, then I will suggest we take our break now, and then we start again in 4 minutes, or was it? Let me just double check myself. We start again when it's what? Yeah, we start again soon. Now, oh goodness Lord, we went a lot over time, but yeah. So I will welcome our next speaker. Thank you, Tenna, so much, and we got really into the questions. So I will welcome our next speaker now. Sortlewa. Yeah, thank you so much for your patience. We are now nearing our last speaker of today. Ms. Nadu Grosing-Fleischer has a master's degree in international and global studies at Roskilde University. And she is part of the Secretariat of the Human Rights Council of Greenland. The Secretariat serves the Council and facilitates the Council's meetings and practices carried out during our whole year. The Secretariat works very closely with the Executive Committee and also ensures that the Council members' respective expertise is included in relevant efforts and projects. The Human Rights Council was established in 2013 on basis of the UN's Paris Principles for the establishment of national human rights organizations. And we were established by Inatsisartut law, our parliament. It is defined in there which stakeholders are represented as members and as observers. So we're actually waiting for our newest members at the moment. So as soon as Inatsisartut has decided them, we will know. And we are patiently awaiting them at the moment. And I just give the words to you, Naduk. And thank you for taking your time.
Thank you, and thank you for all of your presentations. I learned a lot, and I think I can say for all of us from Greenland that we recognize a lot of your issues. And I will just give a brief overview of the status of Indigenous women's rights here in Greenland in the 10 minutes that I have. We could touch upon a lot of issues, but I will just get through. Touch upon these issues: violence against women and the Istanbul Convention, consent-based rape provision, and also the IUD scandal and our view on this case, and the Act on Equality and Anti-Discrimination that is on its way right now. So if we look at the violence against women, so according to the police statistics, crime dangerous to persons such as violence and murder are still the biggest crime challenges in Greenland, and around 19 out of every 1,000 citizens were exposed to violence in 2022. And according to a study and a report from 19, women aged 24 to 35 accounted for the largest proportion of adult survivors of violence in the previous year. So we have a high level of gender-based violence against women and girls, which includes sexual and domestic violence. So the problem here in Greenland is that we lack disaggregated data on a lot of issues, and also on gender-based violence, which causes problems in monitoring this field, and thereby also in the efforts to combat violence against women. And this is an issue that goes through a lot of areas here in Greenland. So on a brighter note, Greenland ratified the Istanbul Convention in 2021, which is Council of Europe's convention on preventing violence against women and domestic violence. And here, psychological violence, stalking, physical violence, sexual violence, and harassment are included among the things that needs to be prevented. So we're very pleased to see this go through, as we have been recommending this since 2019. So another positive note is that Inatsisartut adopted and implemented a consent-based rape provision last year, which came into force this year in July. And this provision shifts the focus from whether the victim has done enough resistance to focus more on whether both parties have ensured that the sexual interaction was mutual. And we have been encouraging Naalakkersuisut to our government to adopt this provision, and among other things, we presented this fact sheet on the issue. So we are also very pleased on this development to protect victims, both in sexual violence and also in all aspects of violence against women. So we heard a bit about the IUD scandal, Tena, and it's an issue that has been on the spotlight a lot here in Greenland for obvious reasons. And in 2002, as Tena said, it was presented that a large number of Greenlandic women were fitted by healthcare providers from Denmark. And it has been presented that around 4,500 IUDs were fitted to girls and women. And the problem here, or one of the problems, is that it was a lot of the times without consent. And this was around, in that period of time, around half of the fertile women, which has led to a dramatic reduction in birth rate among Inuit women, and leading to drastic changes in the composition of the Inuit society here today. But as Rivière and Tena also stated, lately more recent cases has been presented from after 92, and the investigation was initiated on the so-called IUD campaign, as we call the IUD scandal. And as far as I've understood, around 100 women has reported their cases to the main doctor, or and 14 of those women were cases from after 92. So, yeah, but in terms of the reference for the investigation, it does not include the human rights implications, and the investigation is limited to only covering the period from 19 to 91, and we, as long as with the institute in Denmark and the UN Special Rapporteur for Indigenous Peoples, has called upon this issue and called upon to extend the scope to include more recent cases, and also to include the oral testimonies of these victims in the investigation process, which is also the case now. And as mentioned, also there are 67 women who has filed a lawsuit against the state, the Danish state, and demanded compensation as of now. We know that the investigation will last until 25, and this is a case of personal traumas for these women. So we've been communicating and advocated for that compensation should not be up to the individual woman to apply for recognition or compensation, and that it should be paid within a reasonable time for these women. and in March this year we wrote a joint letter to the Minister of Health in Denmark, Sophie Løhde, where we expressed our concerns about this matter. So. And then we have the Act on Equality and Anti-Discrimination, which is now being treated in our parliament, in Inatsisartut. It would actually be finally treated in 1 week exactly, the 10th of November. And our legal composition on discrimination, can you say that? Was limited to we don't have a general prohibition against discrimination as of now, and it's mainly limited to the public spaces and within the labor market. So the new act will entail combating discrimination and ensure equal rights regardless of gender, pregnancy, adoption, maternity leave, sexual orientation, gender identity, gender expression, gender characteristics, race, skin color, national, social or ethnic origin, disability, age or political opinion or religious or belief. And this is a major step in ensuring the protection of far more discrimination cases. And we're very pleased to see this moving forward, as we also recommended an act like this in 19. And the reason why I find it important to mention this in this forum where we talk about Indigenous women is because when we speak of Indigenous women, we must speak of all Indigenous women, also women with LGBTQIA backgrounds, because there are major challenges here in Greenland in regards to discrimination, but also in general there's a lack of focus on LGBTQIA in all forms of reports or data collection. And in this new act that will hopefully go through, gender identity and gender expression is included, which differ from the other criteria because they are largely based on the person's subjective experience of themselves. And this means that the person themselves can decide whether they are covered by this protection against discrimination or not. So it is a major step, and all in all we have a lot of issues regarding Indigenous women here in Greenland, but we also step by step are moving forward in policy making. But we all know that policy making doesn't always I see you, solve all problems in reality, but we are very glad to see that the legal protection is coming forward the past years. Yes, I think that was.
Very good. Thank you so much. Oh, okay, perfect. Thank you. Are there any questions from the audience regarding the different information you have just been given? Yes.
Kadallisuaperipallatasuми imaatto una 2019 namagitaalliorfissaq sananeqartoq imatussuunnersuut ja namagitaalliortarfissamik pilersittisimasumatun sananiartuumatun siunnersuutaanikoo.
I answer in English or well, she asked if the point to the 19 recommendation, if it's a complaint mechanism, as I understood, right? The Act on Discrimination it in itself is not a complete mechanism, but it is a part of the forslag proposition recommendation or around the act that there will be a board on equality that can handle individual complaints, which is also a very big step if that goes forward, that you don't have to go through courts with your discrimination case.
Der var bidersinnerak med den.
It will if the law goes through in 1 week.
Okay,
Hopefully,
okay.
they will work on that.
Okay, ja. Ja, det gør. No, maqatassunga tungaasapporsoorlu miiukkut inuapisinnaatstaaffilerisu inua ataasiakkaasaaffiginnissutaat suliarisinnaangilaksia amerlasut tunnulaeqqutarisarpaat taanna aaliangerneqarnikuusoq inuapiginnaatstaaffin tungasut saaffiginnissinaavugun tanmakkimikkutta ataasiakkaattut kisiamaani аллангуартинеқарниарнерлүни таманна.
Waikisavara.
No, we have been advocating for a body or some sort of. Yeah, maybe you can even answer.
Yes, it's actually since the council's very first report in 2014, because the council was created in 2013, they recommended that there should not only be a council, but actually an entity where people could come with their complaints so that things could actually be done. Right now, the council can only make recommendations, because that's in our name, we're a council, based on many different cases. So if one certain person comes and complains to us about the situation, we cannot take that single case. So it is something that has been told to Naalakkersuisut and Inatsisartut for almost over 10 years now, actually. And we have recommended that we get our own Institute for Human Rights here so that they can take care of the human rights situation in Greenland. Because right now Greenland is under the National Human Rights Institution of Denmark. So it's them who has the authority to help single cases, so to speak. And at the moment, it's very difficult for a Greenlandic person, though they're a Danish citizen, to go to Copenhagen and take that case up. So it is true. It is something we have actually been working on for 10 years. But we cannot do anything but counsel. It's Inatsisartut who has to actually make the decisions. Yeah.
I was just thinking about how, like when we have these commissions that take place for our people, I think for us Indigenous people, we forget to put emphasis on having I don't know what you would call it, but I hear often a watchdog to ensure that it's implemented. Like you can have these organizations that will ensure that it's implemented, but they always refer to their budgets, right? But I think that's our responsibility as Indigenous people to enforce that, to ensure that the Public Commission needs to have that tool in place too, to have that watchdog. Thank you.
Yes, and at one of your first slides, you mentioned according to SDU report. What does SDU report? SDU stand for? The acronym.
It stands for it's a Danish university who makes
okay.
investigations.
Thank you.
Any other questions? If there's no further questions, then I can say that if you have any questions to the former panel of people who have spoken today, you have time to ask your questions to them now or informally later on during lunch. And if not, then I thank you all very much for your participation here. and for all the wonderful questions and comments. And I wish you all a pleasant weekend. Thank you.